Just before I start in the actual script, I just have to say, friends gathering here in the Jack Poole room at the Robert H. Lee Alumni Center on UBC campus, and looking out that window, I think it was Leslie or Carol said it's almost like a special video or something, or a Rockwell landscape, or anyway, we're just thrilled to be here. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the celebration of life for our friend, our colleague, President Emeritus David W. Strangway, who passed away suddenly on December 13th, 2016. We're delighted, despite the weather and the road conditions, that so many of you could join us today for this special event to honor someone who made a huge impact at this institution and across Canada. I have no doubt that David touched your lives in a significant way as he did mine. My name is Peter Efford, and I was asked to be MC today because of my numerous connections with David over the past 30 years. When I wrote that 30 down, it kind of shocked me. That's how many years have passed, in fact, since we began working together in the mid to late 80s. I worked with him as a Vice President of External Affairs here at UBC, and later, David, Blake Bromley, and I were the founding directors of Quest University Canada. I'd like to recognize UBC's President, Santa Ono, Quest President, Peter Englert, and thank them for their support. It's these two institutions that have sponsored today's event. I also want to acknowledge the presence of UBC Chancellor Lindsay Gordon, Quest Chancellor Dan Birch, who you'll hear from later, Board Chair Stuart Belkin. I want to welcome all board members, senior administrators, colleagues, and friends from institutions and organizations across Canada. Most importantly, I'd like to welcome, on behalf of all of us, the Strangway family. Alice, David's wife, meant to be here today. In fact, she made the trip down with the family from Kelowna yesterday, but just wasn't feeling well enough today. So it's our deep regret she's not with us, but we have to be in our best conduct because she'll be watching this in the comfort of her home in about a week's time. So I'll do my best, Alice, as we all will. Her daughter, Trish, is here, though. Her husband, Blair. Girls really wanted a chance to stand up. So their children, Brody, Brooke, and Bryn. Susan's husband, Weave, is here as well.
I'm here, Peter.
Oh, there he is, at the back, working. Thanks, Weave. Unfortunately, Susan and Richard, David's other two children, were unable to be with us today, but we know they're here in spirit. We're also joined, though, by David's brother, Donald. And he has several family members and others here. Who else is with you? Do you want to just stand as a group, as I don't have all the names? I know Paul, John, and Kevin are here, right? And there's obviously some others. Thanks for being here. Thanks so much for being here. We have a number of speakers today who will share with you some of their personal stories about David. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to mention that as a mark of respect for David, flags are lowered not only on this campus, but UBC's campus in the Okanagan, and also at his alma mater, the University of Toronto. Our first speaker has joined us today from the University of Toronto. He's a fellow physicist and long-time friend of David and Alice from David's research days. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jafar Akhani Hamed.
Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. I would like to have some feeling about David as far as his ability of research and how he conduct with the people that he has done. I know David for more than half a century. I met him for the first time in the University of Boulder, Colorado in 1964. I was his new graduate student at that time. And later, about 4 months after that, he went to MIT. So he took me there also. So I was there with him for about 3 years, working with him in the lab with him. And then after 3 months, about 3 years, something like that, he went from MIT to University of Toronto. I stayed at MIT to finish my PhD program there. David accepted an invitation by NASA to be the chief geophysicist and physics branch of NASA at those days called Manned Spacecraft Center, but now it's called Johnson Space Center. So he was there for about 3 years. And during this time, he built I think one of the best rock magnetic labs in the world. And also he made many instruments, electromagnetic measurements, which Apollo people took to the moon and they made the measurements there. David was responsible for all geophysical aspects of Apollo program. In 3 years he was there, 4 Apollos went to the moon, Apollo 14, 15, 16, 17, and they brought a total of 326 kilograms of lunar rocks back.
With the ALSEP functioning, they left the site for a shortened sampling traverse.
Well, many parts of the ALSEP are functioning very well. The heat flow experiment is working excellently. It's transmitting back temperature data. The cooling down is still cooling down from the drilling process, and in a few hours they should be starting to get true heat flow information.
Let's see if I can't crack the corner and get that contact.
David was using majority of them in his lab to understand what's going on in the case of the moon. And for the first time, we understood that the moon had rocks which are magnetized. And how it is magnetized, we didn't know very well. But later, there was another mission, was the Apollo 16 sub-satellite, which orbited the moon at much lower altitude, about 100 kilometers. And that gave a much better feeling about what's going on there, because it showed that Earth's moon's magnetic anomalies or magnetic field is a very long wave phenomenon. Based on those, David was, I think he was the first one, or just one of the first ones, that he suggested that rocks of the moon was magnetized by the core dynamo of the moon. He said the dynamo was at the center of the core of the moon, and they are magnetized that way. David is the author of about 165 peer-reviewed papers. He also wrote a book called The History of the Earth's Magnetic Field, which was published in 1970 by McGraw-Hill. David received many awards, which I am just giving you a few of them, which are science-related. There are lots of awards that he got, not because of the science. He received the NASA's Medal for Exceptional Scientific Achievements in 1972. Kaufman Gold Medal, which is the Society of Exploration Geophysicists of United States, in 1974. Kilo Memorial Award, which was the highest award of Canadians for science. He also received the NASA's Group Achievement Award for MagSat satellite magnetic measurements and analysis. He got the Logan Gold Medal, which is the most prestigious medal of the Geological Society of Canada, in 1984. And also he received the Tuzo Wilson Medal, which is the medal for Canadian Geophysical Union, in 1987. Just, if you don't mind, I just give you 2 minutes about my relationship with David. After MIT, and I went back home, and all of a sudden, in 1971, I received a letter from David as a chief scientist of NASA, invited me to go to NASA to work with him on the internal dynamics of the moon using the Apollo gravity and topography data, which I went there for 2 years. Later, in 1981, I had a trouble with the government of Iran at those days. So David was very helpful, amazingly helpful, to get visa for me and my family plus work permit. So that's what I came to Toronto. During our stay in NASA, our family got very good friends together. My wife, Hamide, and his wife, Alice, were very, very good friends together. And we kept that friendship up to now. I think David was very, very kind to us in any respect you want to say. And we really miss him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, university singers and Jafar, for your stories of David. Another former colleague, Gary Olhoft, I hope I have pronounced that correctly, could not be here today, but he shared some stories in an email which has been passed on to the family. One story was about, and I quote, when David brought the first Apollo lunar sample from Houston to Toronto in his pocket. He went through the Canadian Customs nothing to declare line and wondered a bit about the commotion with TV cameras at the other line. He went home and went to bed. The RCMP called at 11 p.m., waking him up and asked if he could come back to the airport customs to declare his import. The TV people had been waiting for him, but nobody recognized him. That wouldn't have happened recently. Saying he showed me a copy of the customs form he had filled out stating, quotes, item 1 rock, origin moon. Not many people have stories like this, David. The next two speakers I'm going to introduce jointly because both of them have a significant connection both here at UBC and with Quest University, two of David's institutions with which he had such a big impact. First, we'll hear from Dan Birch. You don't have to stand and wave, Dan. We're going to see you in a minute. Who was provost and vice president academic alongside David, and who now is chancellor of Quest University. I had the pleasure of working with Dan during our years together at UBC. I know that David was very pleased when Dan succeeded him as Quest's second chancellor. The second speaker will be Bob Lee. Here it says Chancellor Emeritus, Board of Governors. I think that's because there's so many other things we can list about Bob's connection to UBC that the list would go on, but he'll cover a lot of that ground in his remarks to you. During David's time, Bob played the key role in creating the legacy through the real estate here at UBC that has had a profound impact on UBC's future. Bob was also a director of the Sea to Sky Foundation, which was the foundation that took on the responsibility of developing Quest University. Dan?
Before I even start talking about David, I want to talk about the fact that at UBC, you couldn't think of David without also thinking of Alice. They were tremendous hosts, and that did a huge amount for building the leadership team here at UBC, and we appreciated it greatly. I'm sorry Alice isn't here, but I hope that our appreciation will be relayed to her. David was on the road a great deal when he was president, but from the volume of the communication, you would never know that he was away. We each received tens of pages of faxes from Hong Kong or from Angola or from wherever David was. And these faxes were of considerable interest. And of course, sometimes we responded with a more or less formal, not an email, we weren't in that period yet, but with a more or less formal memo. And David's response to memos was interesting. When you got it back, there wasn't a single white area on the page. David had written his comments absolutely throughout. The other interesting thing about it was that they often appeared to be stained by tears. We didn't think that we'd been that moving in our communication with him, but we discovered that David loved doing his mail in the bathtub. He was really a unique leader. And I think one of the titles, among several that he had at NASA, was Director of Earth and Space Science. And the first time I had an opportunity to introduce David for a speech, I was able to say, here is a man with his feet on the ground and his eyes on the stars. And that was David. Martha Salkerdine reminded me recently that those notes that we got, it didn't stop with the faxes when he left the hotel in Hong Kong, but were probably continued on airline napkins as he flew home. So we had all kinds of interesting artifacts as a result of that. I had the privilege of working with David for his entire 12-year term. I, in fact, had been acting in the role of academic vice president for 6 months before David arrived, and Martha twisted my arm to continue after David left for another 6 months. So my term was 13 years when David's was 12. It was a tremendous privilege to work with him and under his leadership. There were all kinds of examples. And he was never selfish about things, either personally or for his institution. David recruited the presidents of Toronto and McGill to join in a liaison with 3 leading universities in China, which we called the 3-on-3, or 3-by-3, I guess it was. And Larry Sproul, who's back here, traveled with David often on those things, and interestingly enough, Larry would be typing up notes after talking with David in the evening, would send them I think we were in the email period by then, to the desk at the hotel. And David's talking notes would come back in printed form before he even got up. It was, but he never stopped working. One of the things that was good fun with David, he really, though his major contribution was in research leadership and in the building of 2 graduate residential colleges on campus, something that we had never entertained before. But he nonetheless was tremendously interested in the quality of undergraduate learning. He was proud of Arts 1 and subsequently of Science 1, but he was very concerned about the fact that he felt strong research universities, not just in Canada, but throughout North America, underchanged undergraduates, failed to give them the quality of a learning environment that they deserved. And at the end of the day, often, David loved to speculate about why Canada did not have what was considered to be absolutely the pinnacle of undergraduate education in the US, the liberal arts college, independent, private, liberal arts college. It's amazing how many Nobel Prize winners came from an undergraduate education at such institutions. And David would like to talk about what it might take to establish something like that in Canada, in British Columbia, to set the pace here. He also, having worked with Bob Lee in developing property and generating resources to support the institution, he had in mind that you could begin an independent, secular, liberal arts and sciences university, and if you could get the endowment of land, you could enable it to succeed, to prosper, and to continue. It was something of a surprise to me, I guess, when Quest invited me to serve as chancellor. And I knew I did not have anything like the luster that a David Strangway had. But of course, my luster would be enhanced by taking up a position that he had held. So I've enjoyed my 6 years. I've just reaching the very end of it. I want to thank the family members for being here. You know, when David came to UBC, of course, 2 members of his family joined UBC as undergraduates. And so we saw quite a bit of Susan and Trish, and have not seen all that much of them since. But it's our minds and our hearts are very much with you, members of the Strangway family. We treasure the association, and we're very grateful to have had the opportunity of working with your father all those years. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. The cane is not because I'm old. It's because I had an operation on my knee. But good afternoon, everyone. We are here to pay tribute to a very special man whose wide-range intellect led him to 4 noteworthy career accomplishments that was mentioned earlier. First, the emergence of UBC as a leading university. Second, his contribution to NASA as a gifted geophysicist, as was mentioned earlier. Third, his prudent distribution of Canada Foundation of Innovation Awards to restore Canada's research base. And fourth, his latest establishment of Quest University in Squamish, Canada's first unaligned private university. Generally, when men and women strive to record outstanding successes, they say they are reaching for the stars. But for David Strangway was much more pragmatic. He instead reached for the moon. That was when NASA, as was mentioned earlier, recruited him, and David used his superior geophysics knowledge to perfect subsurface experiments in NASA moon missions in 1971 and 72. He later returned to University of Toronto as head of geology, then served as president of 1 year before deciding to join UBC. And I was fortunate enough to be on the selection committee that selected David. And I worked with him for 12 years too, and continued with Quest and so on. I asked David why he had left to join UBC. He said, location, location, location. He learned the word in real estate, that's my background. He said, using that well-known real estate phrase, he explained that China is on one side of the Pacific Rim and UBC is on the other. David added that the emergency of China in 1985 would be far greater than that of the US in the earlier years. He gave two reasons: population size and the ability of anyone to take advantage of the world's ongoing technological advances in every type of communication. What China lacks, David said, was world-class universities. So in the meantime, literally thousands of Chinese students were enrolled abroad in internationally known and respected educational research institutions, and he wanted UBC to be one of those destinations. So in 1992, David initiated a 4-year World Opportunity Campaign that was never done at UBC. He recruited Peter Alford, our MC, to plan to institute the campaign, which raised $262 million, the largest amount of any Canadian university at that time. Actually, I remember on the board, David would say, gee, we want to raise 30 million. I said, how are we going to raise 30 million? And then next time we come to the board, he says, well, we need 60. So he kept on going up and up. But he was very successful in getting people to donate $262 million at that time. In fact, despite his full daily schedule, he had an infinity for night work. He would ask me to call him at any time at home in the evening. I introduced David Strang to many of my Chinese friends in Hong Kong at that time, and most of them became great donors to UBC, thanks to David's salesmanship. To raise money for David's vision, I suggested at that time to form what became UBC Property Trust to develop 500 acres of surplus land. As we know, we have 1,000 acres here, and UBC is using 500. So this is surplus land that was given to the university, and I was fortunate enough that in those days, no one split it up into individual lots, would receive a lot less money. But this is not for land sales, but through 99-year leases. David saw the opportunity and said I could try the idea with 28 acres of this land. This became Hampton Place, right in the corner of 16th and Westbrook, which generated over $81 million that I gave to Martha Piper. David was then quick to recommend that we be given the 500 acres I had originally requested. As a result of this project, UBC today has an endowment that's grown from $81 million to $1.3 billion, and is still growing. The last site we sold, we fetched over $100 million. David retired from UBC in 1998 with Peter Alfred and Blake Bromley, started Quest University in Squamish. The Bluesen became major private benefactors, and the leading edge university opened in 2007. New president, Peter Engler, is leading the university goal of perpetuating David Strangway's legacy of a private institution that provides many distinctive post-secondary advances. In closing, David was indeed a very special, one-of-a-kind man. I express again my condolence to those from my wife, Lily, to Alice Strangway and the Strangway family, Richard, Susan, Trish, and their families, as we today salute their remarkable husband, father, grandfather, and a great friend. We're all certainly going to miss him. Thank you.
I'd now like to invite President Emeritus Martha Piper, who has a unique perspective in that she followed David as president of UBC, and she will speak to what she witnessed as his impact, his vision, his drive. I had the pleasure for a brief period of time, for a year or so, following David's retirement, to work with Martha, who carried on where David left off in heightening UBC's prominence as a world-class institution. Martha?
Well, first of all, I want to thank the family for honoring me and allowing me to participate in this tribute to your father and Alice, to your husband. It's truly an honor to be here. And I also want to express my sincere condolences to the entire family. Now, I knew of David Strangway long before he had ever heard of me. His reputation was well known throughout the country. A man of vision, determination, dedication, and strategic wisdom. The transformation of UBC from a good provincial university to an internationally renowned institution under his stewardship over a short 12 years was legendary. And David was the legend. As I considered applying for the UBC presidency in 1996, I was both in awe and afraid. What made me think I might be able to lead this remarkable university? How could I possibly follow the amazing leaders that had gone before me? Frank Westbrook, our founding president, who had a vision of UBC as the Cambridge by the Pacific. And John B. MacDonald, who came from Harvard and transformed the post-education system of this province. But no one loomed larger in my mind than David Strangway. The person who thrust UBC, kicking and screaming, onto the international stage and made it competitive with the great universities of the world. And yet, as much as I was frightened by the prospect of following David, I knew in my heart it was only because of what he had accomplished that I was interested in joining UBC. David's achievements are well documented. We've heard of many of them this afternoon. Chief of the Geophysics and Physics Branch at the Johnson Spacecraft Center, Provost and President of the University of Toronto, President and Vice Chancellor of UBC, and then President and CEO of the Canada Foundation for Innovation, and the founding President of Quest University, to name just a few. Having won every academic, national, and international award that is possible and widely acknowledged as one of Canada's finest university presidents ever to serve. He's in a handful. And I would say in the last 50 years, probably the finest university president within this country. David Strangway was well known for his commitment to academic excellence, the integrity of inquiry, and the role that universities can and must play in a civil society. But what is less well known is who was David Strangway. While I never worked directly with him or for him, I can say this. David Strangway was incredibly kind and generous to me, always available, always supportive, always willing to listen and guide, always willing to write those notes and fax them under my door when I was in China. David, through his actions and remarkable leadership, taught me how to think big, in billions rather than millions, in global and international impact, in aspirations for this institution and Canada. He worked with me, not against me. He gave of his expertise and energy willingly, never, ever complaining about my incursions into his time. He never criticized me, and I know he didn't always think I was right. He always supported me. And he was always there, answering emails, phone calls, never hesitating to help and advise. Now, all of us know this is not always the case. What did he know about me? Absolutely nothing. How hard it must have been for him to hand over the reins to this unknown person whose credentials were suspect. But no, David was kind and caring, thoughtful, and supportive. One of the last anecdotes I have about David occurred last year when I was back. When I served as interim president. As most of you know, it was not an easy time for UBC, nor for me. At one particular difficult moment, I needed support. Who could I call? Who could I reach out to? Who could I trust to put UBC's interest ahead of their own? Clearly, David Strangway. And so I picked up the phone, dialed his number, and fortunately, he answered. Well, we had not spoken for almost 5 or 6 years, but that didn't matter. He was there, as concerned as if he were at the helm, giving generously of his wisdom and advice, and most important, prepared to lend his voice and influence when needed. That is the David Strangway I came to know and respect. UBC, just look at it, is clearly bigger and more complex today than it was in 1985 when David assumed the presidency. It has more buildings, thousands of more students, a second major campus, more research centers and laboratories, more funding, more revenues, more expenditures, and a much larger endowment, thanks to that vision of UBC Properties Trust and that original $81 million gift that you gave to me, Bob. Is it the same UBC as it was when David stepped down in 1997? Of course not. But what is true is that it is still recognizably the world-renowned university that David Strangway built. And for that, we are all immensely grateful. Thank you.
Boy, what a perfect selection. Read David, and we shall be changed. So thank you, Jason, Tom, and Richard, for the wonderful music. And Martha, thank you for your remarks. It's all resonating with me pretty strongly, but I guess the two words that stand out for me, as you said, that David tried to impart to us, is to think big. So I hope that stays with all of us. Our next speaker is the last before I turn the mic over to David's family, to Blair. And she is a colleague of David's from the Canada Foundation for Innovation. Mademoiselle Manon Harvey worked with David at CFI and will share some of her personal memories from that time. While I had no direct contact with Manon at CFI, we did share something significant in common, and that was the simultaneous sharing of David Strangway. More than once, had to rush him to the airport for him to get back to Ottawa, and I'm sure Manon had to do the same for us here in British Columbia. So Manon, would you please take the mic? Thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. My name is Manon Harvey, and as was mentioned, I'm VP Finance and Corporate Services at Canada Foundation for Innovation. And I'm happy to say a former colleague of mine, Carmen Charette, who's now the VP External Relations at University of Victoria, is also here. But we shared experience, and we've worked with and for David from 1998 to 2004 when he was at the Canada Foundation for Innovation. So I know David when he was president and CEO at the Canada Foundation for Innovation. He started there in 1998, a year after the organization was formed. And I should say it was formed because people like Martha Piper suggested that Canada needed to replenish its research infrastructure in Canada. So thank you, Martha, for inspiring our leaders. And David also joined shortly after the sudden death of our first president, Dr. Keith Brimacombe, formerly from UBC. 2 decades later, those of us still working at CFI now still feel the impact of the vision and the leadership of David. If you knew David professionally, you know he was brilliant, driven, focused, insightful, and innovative. He led his list of professional accomplishments is long and celebrated, and for good reason, and we've heard a lot of them today. But what we all appreciated about David goes beyond what he was able to achieve in his work. And I'm sure family members, grandchildren will appreciate that. We appreciated him because he was one of the most down-to-earth, unassuming, empathetic people I had the pleasure to know. He was the CEO of our organization, one of its founders, in fact, and he often walked around the office without shoes. I don't know if you've seen him like that. Or he would kick them off on a plane, I'm told, and would have his legs up and crossed and write those facts that he would send off to the office. So he was at 30,000 feet on a regular basis, and amazingly, to us, he never suffered from jet lag. He would be arriving from Hong Kong, get into his job in Ottawa, and then fly to Vancouver the following day. So that was quite amazing. We knew when he landed, though, because it was mentioned before, that the fax machine would spit out a ream of paper with handwritten notes from David giving us our orders or things we needed to do in the next few days. So he also spent his lunch hour eating with staff, which is unknown of. And his favorite topic of conversation was his family. The name Alice came up regularly. And when he was eating with staff, he typically would have a soup and sandwich and the apple. He always had an apple with him. So people commented, well, aren't you tired of having the same lunch all the time? He said, no, I like it. And he would tell us a story saying it's this guy who brings his peanut butter sandwich every day, and he complains he doesn't like it. So somebody said one day, well, why don't you tell your wife to prepare you something else? He said, well, I prepare my own lunch. So David did the same. He must have loved the soup and sandwich and the apple. David also, we actually got in the habit of having a few extra neckties ready for him if he had to go to an important event, because he tended to pull a crumpled one from his jacket pocket at the last minute. So we made sure he was always dressed properly to address the crowd. We all know vanity, ego, blind ambition. No, that's not what drove David to the high-level leadership positions that he filled. True passion, vision, determination, brains and talent, those were the attributes that brought him success. He had every reason to command deference, to occupy his place in the hierarchy, and to be called doctor. Yet most of our staff knew him only by David. At our Christmas parties, he easily engaged staff and guests in conversations. He was easygoing and knowledgeable on many topics, many subjects, and could just as comfortably chat about fly fishing with my husband as he could with senior policy makers about the state of research and innovation in Canada and around the world for that matter. David was a trailblazer and a born leader. Of that, there's little doubt. But what we cherish most about him was that he was a warm and wonderful human being, most likely because he was raised by two devoted parents who were missionaries in Africa. He's already missed, and I'm reminded of him every day at work, since when I go from the 3rd to 4th floor, there's a plaque on the staircase landing in his honor, and it reads, "The Strangway." So that was in honor of David. Thank you for the privilege of giving me the opportunity to share my recollection and experiences with David, and best of courage to the Strangway family and friends. Thank you.
Thanks, Minot. As well as we all think, we knew David, I think when you listen to insights like Minot's, there's always something new. The apple, the daily apple, I've certainly seen. I didn't realize it was a daily thing with him, so thank you. The thought that came to mind as I listened to the speakers, I'm going to turn the mic over to Blair in a moment, but the thought that came to mind for me, and as I listened to everyone, and particularly as I looked up at this enlarged photo of David, and that look on his face, and I think probably every one of us who ever did anything with David experienced as you would leave a room after a successful fundraising discussion, or with Dan and others and KD and academic initiatives, or Bob with real estate deal, this boyish, gleeful smile come on his face, and he always said, "We did it." It was never "I did it," and not once did I hear him say it, and that will stay with me for a long time. So David, we did it. All of us did. Our final speaker today is Blair Forrest. Blair is Tricia Strangway's husband, who will speak on behalf of Alice and the family.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm reminded of some words from Finnegan's Wake, which are oft-quoted in moments like this. They lived and laughed and loved and left. I think if James Joyce had ever met David, he might have added, he looked and listened and led and liberated. David wanted to liberate learning in particular and believed that the quest for knowledge and understanding should be free of any artificial constraints. I think anyone that ever talked to him about academics would know that, and have concluded that. What I didn't know about David until recently is that he had a tribal name from Angola, Sycamo, given to him by some members of the Mbundo group in Angola, and that meant the worker of miracles. Listening to the words today, I think that was apropos. Certainly achieved many things which others believed were not possible. A little over a year ago, David spoke to a group of high school students in Kelowna at a wrap-up event for their annual senior class hiking trip. Brody was there, Eden was there. They had an annual trip, senior class trip, to Banff National Park. He was very excited to be introduced by his grandson, Brody, who was in the class. Told them when he was in high school, he never dreamed of becoming a lunar scientist because there was no such thing at the time. When he went off to university, there was no such thing as lunar science. When he did his master's and his doctorate degrees, there was no such thing as lunar science. When he started his career, there was no such thing as lunar science. He never dreamed of becoming a lunar scientist because there was no such thing. And then the Apollo program was launched. NASA came calling, and the next thing you know, he was a lunar scientist. His message was that you never know where life is going to take you, or what opportunities or challenges it's going to present. But there's a good chance that some of them don't even exist right now. He encouraged the students to continue with their pursuit of learning and knowledge, but stressed that they should be less focused on taking this program or that course, and that it was more important to approach whatever field of study they chose with energy and vigor and passion and determination, and to be open and ready for the as yet unknown opportunities and challenges that they will meet. Thank you all for coming to pay tribute to David. Our family wishes to thank Dr. Santaono and the university for sponsoring this wonderful event for David, especially Eilish Courtney of the Ceremonies Office and Gerald Calderon from the Development and Alumni Office for their role in today's event. We'd also like to thank the UBC School of Music for providing such wonderful vocalists and musicians, and thank you also to Dr. Peter Engler for the support of Quest University, and Mr. Jack Lee, who's here, for all of his work producing the program for today's event. We'd also like to thank all today's speakers for their kind words, and Peter Afford for serving as MC. I have a few words from Alice as well. November 5th was Richard's birthday. He came out to Kelowna from Toronto along with his wife Selena to spend that occasion with David and Alice. It was a wonderful week, which included fine weather and the US election. At one point, a large Canadian Forces cargo plane buzzed the rooftops with a thunderous roar. David ran out of the house to see what it was. First one there, excited to the end. On November 12th, David drove Richard and Selena to the airport. The goodbyes were tearful, and we believe that David had a premonition at that time that he would never see Richard again. As events unfolded, it appeared that nothing could be done for David medically, and he passed away on December 13th. And here's the story about his shoes. At home in Kelowna, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was because of growing up in Angola, he didn't need to wear them. But Alice tells us at home in Kelowna, Dave's shoes sit by the door that he last came through, and his beloved dog Heathcliff patiently awaits his return. So thank you, or as David might have said, leaving Angola, obrigado. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Blair. You've done justice by David for certain and the family, and our best to Alice as well. You all know me best, I guess, as David's pitch man. And here's the pitch. Both UBC and Quest University carry funds in David's name. And Bob Lee, Bob's always first off the mark. He said to me, coming, what can I do? Like, what exists at the institutions for David? Well, there is a fund here at UBC, as I said, in Quest, in David's good name. So I'd encourage your support of either or both of those funds. But we've heard about Apollo and University of Toronto and UBC and Quest University and CFI, those important initiatives of his. But as we all know, in the latter years, he turned his attention back to Africa. And I know, and many of you will know, that he called on all of us to do whatever we might to assist the countries in Africa. I don't want to mention any particular cause in Africa because there's far too many, and you might be acquainted with them better than I. All I can say is when Teresa and I turned our attention, thanks to a former colleague here at UBC, we found no difficulty in finding one that suited us, and we're proud to be associated with it. Before we end, I'd like to thank everyone again who made today possible, and for all of you, despite the weather, who turned out. We want to thank, as Blair did, UBC for hosting this celebration of life, and Quest for providing the program that you've all received. Thank you to the singers and musicians from UBC School of Music for their wonderful performances. With that again. And I know the Strangways, as Blair said, are very grateful to all of you for being here. If you're not already done so, please sign the guest book at the front door. Please be aware that the event was recorded and will be posted up on UBC Ceremonies website, where it can be viewed and shared with family, friends, and colleagues. And I think we're all especially pleased to know that Alice will have that opportunity to see that. Following the slideshow, there'll be a final piece of music. And then please stay and enjoy some refreshments, meet with the family, and share with them and one another your own stories of David. Now please enjoy the slideshow of photos, a small window into the life and career of David Strangway. Thank you. Well, that's it, folks. You can make it now. Please do stay for refreshments and to give your condolences to the Strangway family and to share, as I said, memories. Thanks for being here today.